Hi, welcome to Studio 14. I'm Jenny Sawyer, and with us today is Lawrence Pollock, one of our budget managers, and we're going to be talking about the Keep Fort Collins Great tax. Hi, Lawrence. Thanks for being here. So, Keep Fort Collins Great, fondly referred to in the city as KFCG for short.
Yes.
Will you give us a little background on this tax and how and when it came to be?
Sure. It was put forward to the voters in 2010, and this was during a budget year. And for the past budget cycles, and as you know, we do a 2-year budget, a biennial budget, we had done many reductions in force, laying people off, really tightening our belt internally, prudent but internally facing cuts.
So things the citizens wouldn't necessarily notice.
Very little impact to the citizens. We did have some what we called stop doing lists, but they were few and far between because it was mostly internally. But in 2010, we had run out of those options, and so the cuts that we were looking at would be much more visible to the community, like the closing of Mulberry Pool, and other things that really make our community what it is. And so there was a budget that was actually passed by City Council, and on that same night, the tax initiative passed, which was fantastic for the citizens of Fort Collins, and we were able to forego those cuts. And so starting on January 1st of 2011, running for a period of 10 years, the KFCG revenues will be used to provide city services.
So that tax, as I recall, we did a lot of public outreach. We talked about a 1 cent. We came in at a 0.85 cent, and it's doled out by percentages to different services. Is that right?
That's correct. So there are 6 ballot language designations. So the first of those is for street maintenance and repair, and that's 33%.
Okay.
And then there's another 17%, which is for other transportation needs. So 50% of that tax is going to transportation-related services.
Okay.
And then the balance of that is split out with 17% for police, and then 11% for the remaining 3 categories of fire and emergency services, community, and parks and recreation, excuse me.
Right.
And then other community priorities. And that remaining 11% is really focused on what are the council's highest priority uses of that remaining funds.
Okay. And so 3rd year, really, through collecting this tax annually, one of your jobs, and you go to council every year with a report to the community outlining
Correct.
what's been spent and what's been done. What are some of the highlights, not just from this year, but over the last 3 years?
Highlights as far as, well, I mean, people will joke around about the cone zones.
Oh, right, yes.
So that's a double-edged sword, right? Because prior to that tax break initiative, if people recall, the road conditions were pretty miserable, especially hearing from the bike community, the number of potholes that were impacting us. And so now with the benefit of these funds, we can fix roads more proactively.
And we're fixing all of them at once,
Well,
so it appears.
Yes, it does appear that way, but by able to being more proactive, it actually does a huge benefit to the community by reducing the overall cost of those road repairs.
Being more preventative in nature as we go.
Correct. It's easier to maintain than address it when the road is in terrible condition.
Yep. And what kind of services, or what have our emergency services been able to do that they may not have since we've had KFCG?
Well, PFA put in a South Battalion, and one of the benefits for that part of the community has been a significant reduction in the response time of how quickly emergency personnel can be on scene.
Oh, okay.
And so they've been actually tracking that metric and have visibility into the significant improvements that made.
That's great. And police services is always kind of tricky. Like, we're trying to keep up staff, but we're also, people retire. People do a good long career and retire. And
Right.
so I'm not sure where that number's at now, but do they feel like they're pretty well staffed?
Well, you can always do more, right? As far as the most recent citizen survey, which is done every 2 years. The response from that was that the community, by and large, feels that we have the appropriate level of police services out there.
Okay.
But KFCG has been very important in helping to attain more officers. for programs. Like there's one called the NET team, which is the Neighborhood Enforcement Team, which
Right.
proactively goes and works with different neighborhoods or residential complexes, really getting to know the people there and who are the offenders. And so huge reductions in the amount of like bicycle thefts and catching of repeat offenders. And
Yeah.
so the KFCG is definitely able to have a real-time benefit to all the citizens of Fort Collins.
Impact through there. That's great. And so, and as you mentioned, we have made this commitment that we report out every year. You are also, I introduced you as our budget manager, but you also do a lot of our measurement tracking.
That's correct.
So will you tell us a little bit about that and what all we track and how that's going?
As far as related to KFCG, or?
Start there, but then I'd just be curious what other kinds of measurements and where we're at in that journey of tracking and being data-driven.
So I would say we've been on a continuous journey and have made significant improvements in what we do with performance measures. Mm-hmm. And for me, my perspective, that's really important to the community because as stewards of taxpayer dollars, it's not only important that we have a transparent budget process that says, here's how we're going to put your hard-earned dollars to work, but with performance measurement, that's where we can say, how well are we doing providing those programs and services? Mm-hmm. And that's really the importance of it. And so where we're not performing to our targets, then we can have managerial assessments of what do we need to do differently? Are there different strategies we need to make? Are there different levels of resources we need to put in play?
Yep.
And it's that continuous improvement that helps make us a better organization. And so with this year, in our budget process, we have a performance measurement system, a cloud-based solution that we've been able to load with over 500 different performance measurements. Seems like a lot, but
doing a lot of measuring, yeah.
When you
good,
think
though.
about our organization being 30 to 40 different, we'll say, departments or different types of businesses,
Mm-hmm.
It's actually not that many per each one because we provide a lot of different types of services.
Right.
And so for the community, this year when we put our budget requests online on FC.gov, they'll be able to read all the detail that's in any one of our budget requests. And then there's a section on performance measurement, and there will actually be a hot link there where they can click on that link, and then another web page will open up where they can see the actual data, the charts and graphs with the historical performance, our target, what we're committing to, as well as analysis about what does that performance mean.
That's actually great. We've come so far in the last few years, I feel like, on our budget, not only budgeting and performance metrics, but then trying to make it all user-friendly and available to citizens. And I don't know how many citizens have had a look on our website, but I'm just going to name a few of them because we have the KFCG site where people can go in and actually see what those dollars have been spent on in that year. And that also includes some efficiencies that we continue to try to work on as well.
Correct. And if I could speak to that.
Yeah.
So that's at www.fcgov.com/KFCG.
Okay.
KFCG.
Yep.
And on the right-hand side of that page, citizens can click on any of the 3 years of annual reports that we've had. Mm-hmm. And each of those, there's 2 different reports. One is a report of every budget request that utilized KFCG funding.
Oh, okay.
What those dollars were used for, and then what the impact was to the community. The second report is on efficiencies, customer service improvements, process improvements. And that's a really important aspect of this because as part of the KFCG ballot language, we made a commitment to the community that if you allow us to have this additional revenue to provide programs and services to you, at the same time, we will continue to look for those improvements and efficiencies throughout our entire organization.
We won't just say, thanks so much, now we're done.
Exactly. And so when you read through those documents, they're in all 3 years, it's been around 25 to 30 pages. I mean, it's really impressive about part of our organizational culture of trying to do better all the time.
So are there any efficiencies or an example that kind of stands out as something that we've done to be a good steward?
Sure. Coming from a finance perspective, I'll give a couple examples from there. A couple years ago, we refinanced debt that was being paid out of the general fund. And by doing that refi, we were able to save millions of dollars that would have been paid on interest at a higher interest rate and the longer term of the loan as it previously existed.
Okay.
So saving millions of dollars of general fund money. And then most recently, within sales tax, we've implemented a online sales tax software so that vendors can manage their tax receipts with the city online instead of having to fill out paper or come down to our administrative offices.
Nice. So also more sustainable.
Absolutely.
So I was talking about the websites, and I also wanted to mention our dashboard, the benchmarking dashboard.
Yes.
So tell us about that.
So that is located at fcgov.com/dashboard.
Okay.
And that's our community dashboard that went live in February of 2013. Mm-hmm. And so the way it is structured is we have 7 key strategic outcomes, like transportation, safe community, environmental health. We have 7 of those.
Yep.
And so the measures that are included in each of those are what we would consider the most strategic or important from a citizen's perspective to say, how are we performing in transportation? What are the results that we're getting in environmental health? And so on that website, you can see an aggregate summary of how each outcome is performing, and then you can click on any measure and be taken to a very detailed page which shows the actual data, how we performed over time, how we're performing relative to targets, as well as analysis and other information about each measure, like what's its definition, why is it important, what's the city's ability to have an impact on the result of that measure.
Which is perfect. So that page in itself is really cool, actually, data, real time. And I'm trying to bring all these things together because while they stand alone, the benchmarking, the budget page, the tax dollars in KFCG, they kind of all come together in how we choose and how our citizens want us to provide services to them.
That's
Is that
correct.
a fair statement?
It is. And I would say that it actually starts, we think of it like a continuous improvement cycle. And so everything starts with the city's vision and mission. I mean, that's our marching orders, makes our organization who we are.
Yep.
Then we have just implemented our strategic plan at a citywide level, which is looking out 5 years of what are the opportunities and risks that we have facing us as a city organization in the next 5 years. And the purpose of that is so that we can then hone in our focus on what are we going to budget in the next 2 years to address that 5-year strategic plan.
So we're in that budget cycle now, correct?
That is correct. And so with our 2-year budget, we'll focus on what are different ways of doing things, new programs and services that can address the issues identified in that 5-year strategic plan.
Okay.
And so once that budget is adopted and we actually are performing those programs and services for the community, that's where performance measurement is critical to say how well are we doing compared to what we signed up for.
Right.
And from there, yes. And so it's important that, one, we're transparent about that, and that we're not just putting numbers on a shelf or in a book, because then it's a waste of time.
Right.
It has to be actual usable, meaningful data that if we're not moving in the right direction to the targets and goals that we've set, then we look back and say, what as an organization do we need to do to change strategies, resources, changing priorities so that we can actually get back on track and achieve what we committed to in the budget cycle.
Yep. And we give citizens, I mean, obviously we're checking ourselves through this measurement, but we're also, we've got a great citizenry that's very engaged.
Absolutely.
And helps shape that strategic plan, helps shape the budget, all of those things. Since we're in a budget cycle, what opportunities will citizens have for kind of checking in as we determine budget for 2015, 2016?
So there's a number of ways. In the month of May, we will be having different events throughout, call it a mobile roadshow, but where we'll be going and looking at new programs and services within each of those 7 outcomes that I mentioned.
Yep.
And saying, here are a list of programs and services. Let us know which ones do you support and which ones do you not want your tax dollars going to.
What's not a priority?
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so we'll be going and reaching out to a broad segment of society. So that being from our youth, like with the high school and
good.
CSU,
Yep.
to our seniors, and then our business community, to the Latino-speaking community, to those who are near homeless as well as the homeless.
Okay.
Really trying to get that broad perspective of what's important. So we'll be going to events like that, like to farmers markets, and then, so that's a real-time touch point that will be out in the community.
Excellent.
But then for those people who have internet access, we will have the same exercise on fcgov.com /BFO.
Okay.
And so
We'll review all these websites at the end.
that sounds good.
Good.
And they'll be able to do that same exercise of saying, here are the ones I support, here's the ones I don't support.
Okay.
And that information we will aggregate, and then we'll make that available for decision making during our budget process.
Perfect.
And then, so that'll be in the month of May. And then in the fall, we'll have our public hearings as part of the budget
When
process.
it actually goes to council and
When
they're
it goes to
making those
council. So
decisions.
the city manager's recommended budget would have been presented by the end of August. At that point, it's, those decisions of what's in the recommended budget are visible to the community. And then we start the council process. And so there's 2 public hearings. There'll be one in September and one in October. And those are both really important opportunities for citizens to weigh in on what's important.
Say what
But of
they
course, they always have their council member.
Right.
I mean, that's, keep that dialogue open and communicate with them about the things that you're supporting. And if there's things that they don't want to see, then that's important to communicate as well.
What we should be doing, or just choices. I think about if I spent a fraction of that effort on my own personal budget and trying to think ahead of what I actually want to do and how am I going to know if I got there or not, it would be pretty beneficial.
Absolutely.
So now I want to come all the way back. We started with keep Fort Collins great in the tax. Obviously, if you look around town between cone zones and development and building and, we're coming out of this recession, the perception, and here's where I'm checking perception or truth, is that we're doing great. We've got a lot of sales tax coming in. So, do we need KFCG? Obviously, it's in place until 2020.
Correct.
What's the reality of that situation?
There is definitely a perception that the city is just flush with cash. And that, although it would be wonderful if it were true, is not. And the reason that perception is out there is because sales and use tax has been coming in stronger than forecasts,
Yep.
Which is really good. It's a sign of economic health.
And I assume we forecast pretty conservatively.
We do, because we legally can't go over
Right.
what our budget is, and we have to have a balanced budget. The other area that's visible in revenue is development revenue.
Super
you see
visible.
development signs all over.
Yeah.
There's a very robust development aspect of our community right now. So those are visible areas where revenue is strong. But there's many other areas of the city where revenues are flat or declining. One significant one in transportation is the highway users fee. And so that's, as people drive less and have more fuel efficient vehicles, you're paying less at the pump. That money then goes through taxes to the state and then is shared back with cities like Fort Collins. Those revenues are declining. And so although we have some healthy revenue streams in the general fund, it is actually compensating for flat to declining revenue streams in other areas of the city. So we are not awash with cash. We are fiscally healthy, absolutely.
Right.
We are in I would call a very moderate growth environment.
Okay.
But we are in no way flush with cash.
Yeah. And the transportation piece, that could be a whole show on its own, I feel like, for
Absolutely.
where we get those dollars and how we try to maintain, and where we are always sort of chasing money to try to maintain this huge asset and infrastructure system, but it's always a challenge, and hence transportation gets almost 50% of those KFCG dollars.
Right. If you think about Max coming on board,
Yeah.
great benefit to the community. But one of the important things to help make Max more successful is to increase the number of east-west routes that are supporting it.
Right.
There's been talk about having later hours and then having Sunday service to have a more robust transportation system in the city of Fort Collins. All that requires
Right.
funding.
Right. So that might be an interesting part of this upcoming budget process.
Oh, it will be for
See
sure.
what happens. Lawrence, thank you so much. It can be really confusing, I feel like, because there is a lot going on between our existing budget and taxes and dedicated taxes, but I think it's good to focus on the Keep Fort Collins Great one since we just came out with the report to the community on that. So thank you for that. To our citizens, thanks for joining. We did throw out a lot of websites, and they're going to be on your screen here. One is for our budgeting process, referred to as BFO. One is for the Keep Fort Collins Great, report to the community and that tax, KFCG. And the last one we talked about was the dashboard. Yep. So take some time, check those out, and get engaged in May and later this year as we go through our budget process. Thanks for joining us.